Hello, everyone. Good evening, day, or morning. Today, I want to talk to you about jungle economies and how it relates to design economics. So, to give a quick preview of what we're going to talk about, first, we're going to define and model the jungle economy. We're going to introduce 4 different algorithms that allow for alternative exchange methods, that is, alternatives to decentralized exchange. We're going to compare outcomes between those differently designed economies. And finally, we are going to introduce agent-to-agent models, which I think are fascinating. So fundamentally, the question of design economics is, what kind of market do we want? We could have a market that is based on an exchange economy, a decentralized exchange economy. We could have a market that is based on the jungle economy, which we are going to show a model for here in a moment. Or we could even have a market that is based on one of our other alternative exchange methods. And later on in this lecture, we will talk about how planners, how designers have answered that question, what kind of market do we want in their particular situation with the market that they were designing. So first, let's look into the jungle economy. What is a jungle economy? In simple terms, a jungle economy is a might is right economy. More technically speaking, it's an economy where relative power, not wealth, determines each individual's budget set. Rather than auctioning and exchanging of goods, a system of power and subordination determines the equilibrium allocation of goods. Some examples of a jungle economy might be, in the most literal sense, a group of primates in the wild. You see a group of monkeys or apes that are separating a pile of bananas, you are witnessing a jungle economy. A more practical example might be a firm which ranks its employees by seniority. The employees who have been around for longer are considered more powerful, they have more say, they might have more privileges in what they get. Another example might be college freshmen applying for on-campus housing. Now, in this example, it might be a little more difficult to determine what exactly counts as more or less powerful, but we will get there shortly. So, let's look at the jungle economy model. The jungle economy consists of a set of goods that goes from 1 to L that will be represented by the symbol big L, and a social endowment vector E. Now that social endowment vector just means how much of each good do we have. Of all L goods, how much of each good do we start out with? And we assume that we start out with a non-negative number of each of those goods. And you might notice a typo there. There is a missing left parenthesis. I'm sure you're smart. You can see that. And there will be a set I, big I, that consists of 1 to I agents. Each agent in the jungle economy has what is called a binary preference relation. It just ranks any pair of bundles within the consumption set. And this squishy greater than symbol just means prefers. So A greater than B would mean that the agent in question prefers bundle A to bundle B. Lastly, we have the binary power relation, which ranks any pair of agents I and J. This triangle symbol means is more powerful than. So I triangle J means that I is more powerful than J. So the full model of the jungle economy looks like this. The economy J is the set of bundles X as determined by each agent's preference relation, each agent's power relation, and the social endowment. So, 2 things to immediately note are that 1, an agent's level of consumption is determined by preferences and relative power. It's not like an exchange economy where your consumption is determined by your preferences and your budget set. Secondly, we label the agents in such a way that agent 1 is the most powerful, agent 2 is the second most powerful, etc. That ordering will make things easier. So, in the jungle economy, a feasible allocation is a vector X, a consumption vector, that fits within the social allocation. The amount that each individual is consuming and the amount that they consume together does not go above the social allocation. And the residual, which we can call x0, is the social allocation minus the sum of all consumption, which is called the unclaimed bundle. So equilibrium in a jungle economy, I'm going to read the definition that Ponks gives. The equilibrium is a feasible allocation, x, such that no agent can assemble a more preferred bundle than his assigned bundle by combining his own assigned bundle, the bundles in X held by agents less powerful than him, and the unclaimed bundle. What that means, to condense it into fewer words, is that no agent is able to make a strict improvement to his bundle. So we want to prove that jungle equilibrium exists, and to do that we're going to introduce the first of our algorithms. This algorithm is called serial dictatorship, and it will build an allocation vector X in I rounds. And in general, this algorithm describes how allocations in a jungle economy work. So it proceeds forward in a few steps. We're going to go through those. First, in round 1, you will set x1, that is Agent 1's allocation, to be Agent 1's most preferred bundle in the set of all feasible bundles from the social endowment. In simple terms, this means that the boss, the most powerful agent, gets to take exactly what they want as long as it's feasible. Then, in rounds 2 and greater, set xi to be Agent I's most preferred bundle in the set of the bundles which can be made after the more powerful agents have claimed their bundles. Some of these algorithms are deserving of some real-life illustration, so I'm going to build a simple economy here with just 3 agents, and our social endowment is this nice plate of candy. So our first agent in this case is the most powerful, and we're going to call this one Dr. Trump. Dr. Trump wants 8 pieces of candy, and because she's the most powerful, she can take 8 pieces of candy. Now our second most powerful agent isn't quite as powerful but can still take what they want. We're going to call this one Dr. Hanson. Dr. Hanson would like to take 8 pieces of candy, but there are only 2 left. She's going to do the best she can and take the remaining 2. Our third agent is at the absolute bottom of the pecking order. They're not powerful at all. They can't really do anything. We're going to call this one Jesse. Jesse wants 8 pieces of candy also, but there's none left for him. Truly a tragic story. So this is just a 2-step algorithm. You will repeat step 2 for all agents I greater than or equal to 2, and we will prove that this creates an equilibrium in the jungle economy. So in the textbook, this is given as Theorem 3.1. A jungle equilibrium exists and is unique. So the proof for this is actually pretty simple. It can be done in just 2 steps. First off, realize that Agent 1, the most powerful, the boss, must have Agent 1's uniquely optimal bundle. If Agent 1 did not have Agent 1's uniquely optimal bundle, he would simply take it from someone else. He can use his power because he's the boss and take what he wants from someone else. So he must always have his uniquely optimal bundle. And if you are not Agent 1, you are Agent I, after every agent before you has taken their uniquely optimal bundle, then your bundle must be uniquely optimal, because you can't take anything from the people above you, but you can take things from the people below you. So each person in the jungle economy has a uniquely optimal bundle, thus the jungle equilibrium exists, and the jungle equilibrium is unique. A second thing to point out is that the jungle equilibrium is Pareto efficient. This is Theorem 3.2 in the textbook. First off, we would again start with the assumption that Agent 1 holds his uniquely optimal bundle, and then realize that at equilibrium, any agent I can only be made better off if a more powerful agent is made worse off. Agent I can take goods from the people less powerful than him, but can't take anything from the people more powerful than him. So the only way he can make himself better off is to take something from a more powerful agent, and thus they would be worse off. This does highlight an assumption that agents are not indifferent between bundles. That is actually an assumption that we will hold on to for the rest of these models. It is very important to assume that there is no indifference and that preferences are strict. Now that we have defined the jungle economy, we're going to look at one of its applications, and this is an application that allows us to examine the differences and the differences in outcome between the jungle economy and an exchange economy, or Walrasian economy. We will use the house allocation problem to compare these outcomes. So first, let's describe the house allocation problem in the context of an exchange economy. There will be I agents, 1 to I, and L goods, or houses, 1 to L. So L equals I, there is 1 house for each person. We will assume that each agent can only consume 1 house, and that each agent I is endowed with the house L equals I. So each person will start off with exactly 1 house, and we will determine how they want to exchange those houses, trade up for a better one, sell their house off, things like that. If we were instead in the context of a jungle economy, we would replace the private endowments with the social endowment vector, which is just 1 unit of each house in L. We would also include an arbitrary power ranking of agents to determine who gets the first pick. So how do we find equilibrium in the house allocation problem? Well, if it's a jungle equilibrium, we would simply apply the serial dictatorship algorithm, and that would lead to the equilibrium as long as we have a strict power ranking of agents. For Walrasian equilibrium, serial dictatorship doesn't meet one of the requirements, and that is that the allocation is voluntary. There is a possibility with SD that the final allocation is not voluntary. So we want an algorithm that can describe voluntary transactions. The algorithm that can do this is called top trading cycles. The top trading cycles algorithm, or TTC, goes as follows. So we will start with R, which is just the current round we are at, and capital R is the total number of rounds. At the first round, each agent makes a list that ranks all houses according to their preference. Each agent will point to the highest ranked house on his list, and each house will point back to its owner. Now, the interesting thing about TTC is that at least one trading cycle must exist. When you identify a trading cycle, each agent in a cycle is assigned the house he points to. Finally, each agent without a house will remove the taken houses from his list, and if any agents are still unhoused after this round, you will set R equals R plus 1, or in other words, move to the next round, and repeat from step 2. If you come to the end of a round and all agents have a house, you will set capital R to be R, which means you have completed your final round. So I have here a set of agents 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and houses A, B, C, D, and E. Now, as it was stated in the algorithm, each house points to its owner. And in round 1, each person is going to point to the house that they want the most. So I'm going to draw that out in pink here. Now, if we look at what is happening with agent 1, 2, and 3, we see that agent 3 is pointing to house B. House B's owner is pointing to house A. House A's owner is pointing to house C. House C's owner is pointing to house B. This is what we call a trading cycle. It goes from person 3 to person 2, then from person 2 to person 1, then from person 1 back to person 3. These 3 agents can benefit if they trade houses with each other. The person who owns this house wants this house, the person who owns that house wants this house, the person who owns that house. It goes around in such a way that they are able to trade with each other and benefit. Person 4 and 5 are not in any beneficial cycles, and so they can't make any Pareto improvements. So in round 2, person 1, 2, and 3 have left the market. They've gotten their preferred houses. Person 4 pointing at their own house actually does create a cycle. They are best when they trade with themselves at this point, or effectively take their own allocation. And person 5 is not in a beneficial cycle, so finally, person 4 leaves the market. I'll draw the trading cycle here. It just looks like that. And finally, person 5 in the last round points to their own house, and we find the last trading cycle. So I'm going to show a couple more theorems. I do not have the space to show the proofs for these theorems. These proofs are quite long and wordy, but they are still important to know to see how TTC works. So first off, theorem 3.3 in the textbook says the allocation selected by TTC is voluntary and Pareto efficient. Second is theorem 3.4, which says the TTC allocation and the corresponding price vector comprise a Walrasian equilibrium of the house allocation problem with private endowments. And conversely, any Walrasian equilibrium allocation is the TTC allocation. In other words, the top trading cycles algorithm necessarily reaches the same allocation that you would reach from standard Walrasian equilibrium allocations. Theorem 3.3 and Theorem 3.4, when you put them together, actually derive a version of the first welfare theorem, which the textbook gives as Theorem 3.5, that in the house allocation problem with private endowments, the unique Walrasian equilibrium allocation is Pareto efficient. So we've determined that either the jungle equilibrium allocation and the Walrasian equilibrium allocation, which can also be given by top trading cycles, are both Pareto efficient. So we have to ask the question, which one is better? Jungle equilibrium favors the more powerful agents, the ones who are at the top, and the ones who are able to subjugate the other agents around them. However, Walrasian equilibrium favors richer agents. If someone's house in the top trading cycles algorithm is more popular, it will command a higher price. So we ask the question, which should be rewarded? Should the market that we are building favor the rich or favor the powerful if we are choosing between these two? A thing to note is that the Walrasian equilibrium does allow a certain degree of inequality of consumption. If everyone is taking one house, then quite simply, someone will get the better house and someone will get the worse house. However, jungle equilibrium is based on maximal inequality of power, and thus it will lead to maximal inequality of consumption. So if we wanted to fix that, we could propose a different model that allows the power variable to be more finely tuned. And we do have an algorithm that does this. It is random serial dictatorship. Random serial dictatorship, or RSD, is based on a modified jungle economy where power is a degreed variable and equilibrium allocation is continuous with respect to power. Now, if we assume that the power relation is a random variable, this allows for a lot more control. We can control the probability distribution of that random variable, and thus we can control the equilibrium allocation of goods. So random serial dictatorship, again, is just a two-step algorithm. It is just create a power ranking of agents at random based on whatever distribution you wish, and apply serial dictatorship based on that random distribution. Now we're going to go back to that design economics question for a second. Again, what kind of market and what kind of system do we wish to build? We've discussed three algorithms so far, and each of them does have use in different designing spaces. Serial dictatorship finds use when there is a clear merit to be rewarded. The former Soviet Union used the serial dictatorship algorithm to assign jobs to university graduates. The students' grades were considered their power variable. In Mexico City, schools that assign seating in classrooms use serial dictatorship, again using student grades, with the students that have the highest grades getting the first pick. And as we mentioned earlier, employers who assign offices by seniority, the employees who have been there the longest are considered the most powerful and thus get the best picks. The random serial dictatorship algorithm, RSD, finds use when there is no endowment of the objects being allocated, when there is no initial endowment, or if there is no clear merit to be rewarded. A common example of this is assigning dorm rooms to college freshmen. The freshmen do not initially have a dorm, so there is no way for them to have the best dorm or the worst dorm to determine their budget set. So RSD is often used to randomly give certain students the first pick. Another example, also in the academic world, is assigning courses to new students. There is no GPA or seniority to go off of, so the power distribution is random. Top trading cycles finds use when agents join the exchange along with their endowments. A simple example of this is the reallocation of dorm rooms among college students. If a student wishes to switch dorms, they are not only joining the market for dorms, but they are leaving an empty space. They are simultaneously bringing a new dorm room to the market and joining the exchange themselves. An interesting example, and one that we'll talk about a little more, is the kidney exchange with donors and recipients. When a kidney recipient joins the kidney exchange, they are simultaneously bringing their own tissue into the exchange and seeking some for themselves. So top trading cycles finds use in the market for kidneys, but it does raise the question, why would we not use a decentralized market to trade kidneys? And in some countries, there is a legal market where kidneys can be bought and sold for cash. But some goods are considered repugnant to trade in decentralized markets, and I ought to define that word repugnant because Ponks does use it quite liberally. He says that a repugnant transaction is more vague than a strictly immoral transaction, and immoral transaction is one in which you can clearly define that it is wrong. Something like stealing or assault or murder for hire, those are things where you could give clear reasons why those things are wrong and why they should not exist within the economy. But something like the selling of kidneys or the selling of horse meat or the buying and selling of other human tissue, those things might not be strictly immoral, but they feel very wrong. So Roth in 2004 proposed the use of the top trading cycles algorithm as an alternative to the decentralized exchange of organs, kidneys in particular. But the top trading cycles algorithm does effectively give the same outcome as the market outcome. So why would we use it if the market outcome is exactly the same? In other words, why is using an algorithm okay when using decentralized exchange isn't okay? Well, there are a few reasons, a few possible reasons. First off, each agent's budget set is only one kidney. When someone joins the kidney exchange, they are only able to donate kidneys and receive kidneys. Kidneys cannot be traded for cash, and kidneys can only be traded for other kidneys. This creates a kidney submarket in which kidneys are isolated from other areas of the market. Another possible reason is that the top trading cycles algorithm guarantees that we reach the Walrasian equilibrium allocation. A free market might be subject to foul play. Also, in a free market, it may be hard to know whether gains from trade have been realized. This is something that actually comes up in a lot of different contexts, but when you are in the top trading cycles system, it is easy to find out when you have found the house or the kidney that you want the most. So another place that the top trading cycles algorithm was tried was in school choice in Boston. Students were able to choose what school they went to, and the city of Boston attempted to make a system that would allow students to go to the same school as their siblings, so parents didn't have to drive their kids to two different schools. So schools were considered houses in the house allocation problem, and a student's endowment was the school that their sibling attended. Now, ideally, this would prevent the problem of parents having to drive their children to two different schools, but ultimately, TTC created too many problems. It was rejected because students whose siblings attended very desirable schools suddenly became very wealthy, so to speak. If your sibling attends a very desirable school, you suddenly have the ability to pick any school that you would wish to attend. Now, we're about to get to the last section, which is on agent-to-agent models. And I think that these models are fascinating, but they're also very difficult to work with. So I wanted to take a second to remind you of something very important. Your brain runs almost exclusively on glucose, so it's very important to give yourself a brownie break. So everyone, grab your brownie and just... All right, back to the lecture. All the models we've talked about so far have concerned matching agents with their respective bundles of goods. But both jungle models and Walrasian models fail at modeling those kinds of situations where agents are matched to other agents. This could be an employee-employer relationship, this could be roommates, this could be couples looking to be married. If we were to treat these like a jungle economy or a Walrasian economy, treating one group as the agents and the other group as the goods, it wouldn't work out so well. For instance, if in the marriage problem, the men were considered agents and the women were considered goods to be traded, that would just be slavery. So we really need a different kind of model that can accurately describe how agents are actually providing themselves. The first example of this kind of problem that we will look into is the roommates problem. Now, the goal of this problem is to match agents into pairs or leave them alone. Leaving an agent alone will be equivalent to matching them to themselves. So the problem consists of a finite set of I agents, which is given by big I. A match labeled X is a partition of I into pairs and singles. Now, each agent I has a binary preference relation for all agents, including himself. The preference relation works the same as it did in a jungle economy. We would say that if I is preferred by agent I to J, that means agent I prefers being by himself than being with agent J. We would say this means that agent J is unacceptable for I. On the other hand, if agent J is preferred by I to I, in other words, I prefers being with agent J to being with himself, that means agent J is acceptable for I. In the roommates problem, at equilibrium, we would expect two different things to be true. First off, we would expect that no agent is worse off after matching than he would have been by himself. In other words, the final match is voluntary. If an agent is worse off after matching, then he would actually prefer to just be by himself. So the final match must be voluntary. The second thing we would expect at equilibrium is that all gains from matching have been fully realized. What this means, practically speaking, is that there is no blocking pair. A blocking pair is a pair of agents who are not matched with each other, but would prefer to match with each other. If there are two agents who are not matched, but would prefer to be matched, that means gains from matching have not been fully realized. So a big part of these agent-to-agent problems and what a lot of models look for is stability. A match X is considered stable if it is voluntary and contains no blocking pair. In other words, if it meets those two equilibrium conditions, the match is considered stable. Now, in the roommates problem, a stable match is not actually guaranteed. It is possible to have a starting scenario that does not lead to stable matches. There is a proof by counterexample in the book. You could also do a theoretical proof, but that would take a lot of time. But suffice it to say that in the roommates problem, there is no guarantee that you will find all stable matches. So what we can do instead is refocus on a problem in which those stable matches are guaranteed to exist. And that problem, famously or infamously, is the marriage problem. The marriage problem is effectively a subset of the roommates problem, in which agents are split into male and female, and the goal is to make male-female pairs, heterosexual pairs. So if we let M be the set of men and W be the set of women, the set of all agents is M plus W. The goal of the problem, again, is to match men and women into heterosexual pairs, or, again, to leave them unmatched, which is equivalent to matching them with themselves. In the marriage problem, it is possible to show that stable matches will exist, but before we do that, I should point out that stable matches are not guaranteed to be unique. If we take a simple model with only 4 individuals, we can show that. If there are 2 men, M and M prime, and 2 women, W and W prime, and if we assume that all partners of the opposite sex are acceptable, and use the preference relations which are shown on screen, then we actually have 2 different sets of possible stable matches. Multiple matches can be stable, uniqueness is not guaranteed. But as I said a second ago, what we're most interested in is proving that we can reach that point of stability, and we will do so with our last algorithm of the day. This is the man proposing deferred acceptance algorithm. It is often shortened to just deferred acceptance, or DA. Now, the steps of the algorithm go as follows. First, each man makes a list that ranks all acceptable women, again, acceptable women being the women he prefers more than just himself. Second, each man proposes to the first woman on his list, the top woman on his list. Then, from the woman's side, she has to compare the men who have proposed to her to the man she currently holds, if any, or if she doesn't have any men currently, she compares it to herself. She will tentatively hold on to the one whom she likes most and who is acceptable if such a man exists. If there are no acceptable men so far, she will just reject them, but regardless, she rejects the remaining men. Finally, if at least one man was rejected, we repeat from step 2, and if no men were rejected, that means all matches have been made, and we match each woman to the man whom she is currently holding. So, in the book, Theorem 3.7 states that in the marriage problem, the match selected by the man proposing deferred acceptance algorithm is stable, and thus a stable match always exists. This is a bit of a lengthy proof, but it is worth going through. So first off, we have to posit that all partners are acceptable. All matches we've made are at least acceptable. No man would propose to a woman who he finds unacceptable, and no woman would accept a proposal from a man whom she finds unacceptable. So, all partners are acceptable. Now, suppose that man M prefers woman W to his current partner. It might be himself or it might be another woman. And in some round, man M proposes to woman W and she rejects him in favor of someone else, which again could be either herself or another man. So there are two possible scenarios here. Either woman W rejects him in favor of herself, or woman W rejects him in favor of another man. In the case that she rejects him in favor of herself, that is, she prefers herself, then M is unacceptable, and thus MW cannot be a blocking pair. In the case that W prefers another man, she will eventually be matched either to that man or to a man she likes even more, and thus MW cannot be a blocking pair. So in either case, there is no blocking pair. Thus, no blocking pair exists, and the match is stable. So we can prove that the match selected by the man proposing DA algorithm is stable. It is also worth noting that this allocation is efficient. Theorem 3.8 states that in the roommates problem, and by extension the marriage problem, any stable match is Pareto efficient. We can prove this one by contradiction. Say that a stable match, X, is not Pareto efficient. If the match is not Pareto efficient, that means we could find an agent A who can be made better off without someone else being made worse off. So again, there are two different scenarios. Either A prefers himself or A prefers someone else. So if A prefers himself, A prefers to be unmatched. That means he must have an unacceptable partner, which contradicts the premise that X is stable. And second, if A prefers a different agent B, then the Pareto improvement would require that B is also no worse off as a result of being matched to A, but in addition to that, B must be strictly better off because of the assumption of strict preferences. For B to switch partners, B must strictly prefer A. Thus, A and B are a blocking pair, and this would again contradict the premise that X is stable. So, by contradiction, we can prove that in the roommates problem and the marriage problem, a stable match must be Pareto efficient. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about lying. People often ask the question, is all fair in love and war? And I'm not going to claim to answer that question, but lying seems to have some benefits for the liars. So let's go back to our example with 2 men and 2 women. With this given preference relation, if everyone in the process, if all agents state their preferences truthfully, then the DA algorithm will finish in one round, and it will select the match MW, M prime, W prime. Now notice that for woman W, she actually prefers the other man to the one that she got. She would prefer M prime, but she got M. Now she can manipulate the situation by lying about her preferences. So suppose that woman W misrepresents her preferences and says that M prime is her only acceptable man. So at the first round of DA, W rejects M and W prime tentatively accepts M prime. At the second round, W prime accepts M and releases M prime. And at the third round, M prime proposes to W and is accepted. So woman W has changed the outcome by misrepresenting her own preferences. The final match is M prime W and MW prime. What woman W has effectively done is played hard to get. And by doing so, she ended up with a man whom she prefers more. Now, where does this happen in the real world? It's not that hard to think of examples, really. This could be interpreted in 2 different ways, though. It could be interpreted as the woman understating her demand for men, or as restricting her supply, that is, of herself. Now, as far as understating demand, this happens a lot. An employer might understate their demand for labor in order to drive down wages. A buyer might understate their demand in order to drive down prices. It is a common rule for haggling that you always want to stay detached and not act like you want the thing you're trying to haggle for. You want to understate your demand. And we've already talked at great length in class about how a monopolist might restrict supply in order to induce an increase in price. It is very typical for sellers who have some market power to restrict supply. Now, it's worth noting that for this strategy to profitably work, the woman who is lying must know everyone else's preferences, and that would be difficult in a large group. However, if all women were to coordinate their strategies, they can induce the optimal match, or what Ponks calls the woman optimal match, basically the match that is most preferred by the women involved. In general, DA will tend towards the man optimal match. In fact, it is mathematically provable that it will tend towards the man optimal match. But if women coordinate their strategies, they can induce the woman optimal match. And in addition, men cannot profitably lie. Ponks does not give a proof for this. In fact, he actually leaves it as an exercise for the reader. So if you want to have some fun for an afternoon, try to create a proof that in the man proposing DA problem, men cannot profitably lie, but women can profitably lie. Now, after the Boston School District rejected top trading cycles, they tried using the deferred acceptance algorithm instead, with school seats as women and students as men. Each school would give a higher rank to the students who have siblings at the school or students who live nearby, and students were asked to strictly rank their preferences of schools. Because all these algorithms require strict preferences, it had to be done in such a way that no school would be indifferent between students, and indifferences were solved through randomization. The result of the deferred acceptance algorithm is student optimal, as schools by design cannot lie. It would be very difficult for them to falsify how close the student lives or falsify whether or not their sibling attends the school. It would have been possible if they'd gotten more information or if they'd been able to more richly express their preferences over how well a student did or how wealthy their parents are, but by design the schools were not allowed to select for those things. So, to conclude everything we've talked about today, we have introduced and demonstrated 4 different centralized trading algorithms. We looked at serial dictatorship, random serial dictatorship, top trading cycles, and deferred acceptance that deliver equilibrium outcomes without relying on agents' decentralized actions. Someone who is in a position of creating or designing a market may prefer these algorithms to unregulated exchange in order to not leave outcomes to chance or trust. It is stated that it might not be that the market planner hates the market outcome, it might be that they appreciate the market outcome so much that they don't want it to be left to chance. A planner may also prefer one of these algorithms if it is hard to diagnose Pareto efficiency in a pure exchange economy. Like we said earlier, it can be very difficult to realize when all gains from trade have been exhausted. On the other hand, in the example of kidney submarkets, if we are to create a submarket where only goods of the same type can be traded, it is much easier to diagnose when those gains from trade have been realized. However, everything we've talked about today is worth putting in context. Some markets, and I should have said many markets, view the quote-unquote informal matching procedure as a necessary feature of the market itself and not a problem to be fixed. So as much fun as it is to look at these different trading algorithms and alternative trading methods and look at what their uses might be, one has to assess first if the situation they're in even needs to be fixed. A designer must discern whether the system that they are given or the system that they are building upon is actually broken before applying some kind of centralizing algorithm to fix it. The uglier features of a market may actually be an integral part of its existence, and those uglier features might actually be the agent's optimal response to the features of the environment that they are in. So you must take that into consideration if you want to put any of these design economics principles into practice. Build what works, and if it works, it might not need built upon. With that being said, I want to thank you all for listening. I will take any questions now, and please give yourself another brownie break.